listening to the Pump Take Basketball Show with Marco Goldblatt and Kale Meyer.
Welcome, everyone, back to the Pump Take Sport Basketball Podcast. Some new, I'm doing the intro. So welcome. Glad you guys are here. Glad you guys are tuning in. I'm here with Kale, and we are going to talk about an interesting topic, something that is very prevalent in the basketball media world. We are going to talk about the PlayIn tournament. So first, if you don't know what the PlayIn tournament is, Kale, you want to describe what it is? I'm going to share my screen so everyone can see. Go ahead.
For anyone listening on Spotify, you won't be able to see Marco's screen, but that's okay. So just as a brief introduction to how the PlayIn tournament works here. The 7th place team, as you can see on the screen, will host the 8th place team in a one-game matchup. All of these games are one and done, sort of similar to the NFL playoffs or NCAA. And the winner of that 7 versus 8 seed will get the 7th seed in the playoffs. The 9th seeded team will host the 10th place team in another one and done matchup, and the loser of that game is then eliminated. The loser of the 7th place versus 8th place game will then host the winner of the 9 versus 10 game in another one and done matchup. And the winner of that game will then finally earn the number 8 seed, and then we proceed on the playoffs as normal from there. So for our first matchup in the East of 9 versus 10, we're just going to be going over just the teams that are sitting in the places now and predicting who's going to win. So in the East 9 versus 10, we have the Pacers as the 9th seed versus the Wizards as the 10th seed. Marco, who do you think is gonna win this matchup in the East?
Man, right now I am in on the Wizards. The Pacers have been falling a little recently, and the Wizards are rolling. They've won, I think, like 8 out of their last 10 games. Don't quote me on that, but it's something pretty great. Westbrook is playing out of his mind. Bradley Beal's obviously playing great. And yeah, I think just the Wizards are rolling, and in a one and done game, I think that's what's exciting to me. And we'll talk about our opinions after, but to me, that's what's exciting. It's like one and done game. Really anyone can win. And right now the Wizards are rolling. So I feel like the Wizards will be playing the loser of either the Celtics or the Hornets in the play-in game. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know what just happened with my mic there. I completely agree with you. I think the Wizards are just the hotter team right now, and we're starting to finally just see the Russell Westbrook that was promised at the beginning of the season when he came to Washington. Right. And the Pacers have been sliding lately. Like, they're having like coaching and personnel issues, just internal conflicts with the team, and I just don't think that they're equipped to really make a run at the playoffs. And they're starting to struggle at completely the wrong time for them.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it being one down, we'll talk about this later, and this is part of the reason that I don't really love the play-in tournament, but I won't go into it now. But anyways, I agree with you. The Wizards win the 9 versus 10 game, and then we have the Celtics as the 7th seed. That's a little bit of a surprise, playing the Hornets as the 8th seed. Personally, as good as Charlotte has been this year, I think that in a one and done game, the Celtics just have the star power with guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, that they're able to just overpower the Hornets in this game. And I give this one to the Celtics personally.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. How cool this is what I kind of like about it, but how cool would it be if the Celtics lost to the Hornets, which it is a possibility. And keep in mind also, it is completely a possibility that these 4 change. Like, it's a possibility that the Bulls push the Raptors. These teams are still not out. And as we see the Pacers sliding, they could slide out of the play-in tournament, completely. But as it is right now, like, it would be exciting if the Celtics lost to the Hornets and then the Celtics and the Wizards played in the one and done game for the 8th seed. Like, that would be exciting for sure. But yeah, I agree with you, Kale. I think the Celtics do have what it takes to move on. And then with the Hornets, and in this scenario, I guess, with the Hornets and Wizards playing, I think I would still take the Wizards. I think the Wizards they're on a roll, man.
That's what I have in my notes as well. I think that the Wizards are they're a lot better than they were at the start of the year, and I think that we're finally just seeing what Washington is capable of a little bit.
Yeah.
any team that has a combination of Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal is just going to just be dangerous in some capacity because those guys are just such offensive weapons that they can just like, especially in a game that's one and done, like all it takes is for those two guys to get hot, and the Wizards are gonna win. So yes, I agree with you that the Wizards are going to beat the Hornets in this game.
For sure. All right, you want to move on to the West?
Yep.
Let's get it. All right,
So
West, very exciting.
The West is exciting. So in our first matchup of the West, we have the 9th seed Grizzlies versus the 10 seed Spurs. In this game, I think that the Spurs are the slightly more experienced team. They're coached by Popovich for one thing, whereas it kind of contrasts from what I've seen with the Grizzlies this year, where just as a viewer, it seems like they've struggled to click a little bit offensively at times, and that they can be very, very inconsistent. Whereas the Spurs they're a little bit just more grounded. They have a little bit more of just like a veteran feel to them. So in this game, I take the 10th seed Spurs over the Grizzlies to win. Yeah,
and just an interesting thing where in both conferences, we're taking the 10th over the 9th. So
yeah.
And you know what? Another reason is like this season, it's been so full of injuries and COVID bullshit that it's just we'll talk about our opinions later, but it's interesting, right? Like anything can happen. And then, super exciting, the Los Angeles Lakers would be playing the Golden State Warriors in the 7 and 8 game. Mm-hmm. And I think we both would take the Lakers in this game, right?
Oh yeah. I would absolutely take the Lakers. The Lakers are in a unique situation here where they've struggled with just injuries and like COVID things for a lot of the season, that they really shouldn't even be in this position where they're even in the play-in. So yes, I'm taking the Lakers to win this game against the Warriors and get the 7th seed.
Yeah, and that just will be an exciting game, and it will be like just a media thing, like Curry, LeBron, like it's just going to be Stephen A is going to be off his ass. Everyone's just going to be flipping out. So yeah, it's an exciting game. So I hope this does happen. I hope that the 7 and 8 seeds stay the same, because that will be an exciting game. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then so I guess in this scenario, the Warriors will play the Grizzlies. And I see that,
or the Spurs. Are we picking the Spurs or the Spurs?
You're right.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. You're right. So the Warriors would be playing the Spurs, and I see Curry dropping maybe 50 or 60 on him and taking this game.
Yeah,
maybe I'm wrong, but yeah.
No, I agree with you. I think that in a one and done game, just having Curry on your team is such an advantage. He's a proven superstar, proven playoff performer, and I think that the Warriors would beat the Spurs in that game. Yeah. And now, so just in conclusion, I believe for the East we have the Celtics as our 7th seed.
Yeah.
And then the Wizards squeaking in as the 8th seed. And then in the West we have the Lakers as our 7th seed and the Warriors squeaking in at the 8th seed.
Yeah, and in the actual season, it looks like there's 72 games this season. So it looks like a lot of teams only have, a lot of teams have less than 10 games left. Looks like every team has less than 10 games left. So some teams even have just like 5. So it's really creeping to the end. And yeah, as you said, like the Lakers, I think is the most surprising candidate in this play-in tournament. And I don't know how you want to start it off talking about our opinions. Do you think that talking about the LeBron statement is a good place to start? Or
yeah, I do think it's a good place to start, because that's one of the primary points that, like, my personal position is that I don't like the play-in tournament. I don't like, sure, I understand why it would be exciting, but personally I just don't think it's a necessary or good change to make. Now, for those of you who are watching, I'm sure if you follow the NBA, you've heard about the heat that LeBron's been taking, is that he said, I believe that whoever came up with the play-in tournament deserves to be fired. I don't know if they deserve to be fired necessarily.
That was harsh.
but I completely agree with him. And LeBron isn't the only player that's echoed the sentiment. Like Doncic has also said that he's not in support of the play-in tournament. And just there's so many just star and non-star players across the league that feel the same way. And I think that the main reason that guys like LeBron and Luka are against this tournament is that, especially in a shortened season, this just puts way too much stress on the players. This schedule has been compressed into 72 games, right?
Yeah, 72 games this season.
And because of that compressed schedule and the fact that a lot of teams have had games pushed back into the later half of the year, teams are playing more back-to-backs than ever. They have less rest. And this kind of workload, it's reflected in the injuries that we're seeing in star players this season. We're looking at a lot of teams that have had star players out of their lineups for a good majority of the year. And then this has had a big effect on the standings. The play-in tournament occurs over, I believe it starts May 18th to the 21st, and then the playoffs start on the 22nd. So in a season where teams are already facing injury concerns because of playing heightened back-to-backs, I don't think that it's a responsible or fair decision to cram these must-win games into the course of one weekend and then expect those teams to go and play and immediately jump into the playoffs with no break. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, and I come from a different mindset, I guess. And I do understand what you're saying. I do understand, but I think when you're looking at it from a 7th or 8th seed perspective, like a LeBron or a player higher up in the tournament, like a Luka, you might be thinking of it in a different mindset because you're like, okay, if the playoffs were just normal, like they always are, then I would be in the playoffs and I wouldn't have to play these extra games. But how I'm looking at it is, I guess, from like a league and fan perspective. And I think from that perspective is where the play-in tournament kind of excels and where it becomes exciting and beneficial for the NBA. So what I kind of have in my notes and what I've just kind of been looking at is the more competing teams in the playoffs, the more fun it is for fans and the more exciting it is. Like I'm excited for the play-in. I keep saying playoff. I guess it's an extension of the playoffs, really, but I'm excited for the play-in tournament because it creates more interest at the end of the season. And I think regularly at the end of the regular season, fans and teams as well start to kind of lose interest. Like a lot of times teams, that's when they start to rest players. And that's when they start to not be as passionate and be as like, dying to win as usual. And this play-in tournament puts pressure, as you were saying, which is a double-edged sword, of course, but it puts pressure on these players and these teams, the coaching staff, whoever, to really step up and put on an exciting show for the fans and for the league. And I think that is, more games, these one and done games, it creates this excitement that we've kind of never had. Like, I guess how the playoffs have always been is the better team. Like the one plays the 8, we know that the 1 is going to win. But right now, we have a possibility that the 7th seed would play the 10th seed and the 10th seed would make the playoffs. That's exciting to me.
But is that, in my opinion, that just defeats the purpose of just having the best teams in the playoffs. Because when you start introducing things like one and dones into a sport like basketball, where a team can get hot and win, anybody can win on any given night, what's the point of playing 72 games then? Like, if the Lakers, for example, have won X amount more games than the 10th seed, I don't agree that it's in the spirit of good competition to then have it possible for a team that normally they weren't good enough in the regular season to make the playoffs. And I think that there's just certain things in sports that you don't need to tamper with. And I think that the classic, like, there's an 8-team seeding and then it's the bracket from there. Mm. That's how sports that have 82 game seasons have worked. That's how the NBA works. That's how the NHL has worked in the past. And I don't think that there's any need to change something that's not broken.
Yeah. And I see where you're coming from, but for me, I'm looking at like, for example, one thing that I love about football is the one and done games. And I just became a football fan, like, I've only been a football fan for less than 2 years. Like last season was when I became a real football fan. And I love the way the playoffs are in football because it's that exciting, like, we don't know who's going to win. It could be a huge upset in this game where this lower seed wildcard team comes in and takes off this big contender. And I guess that's what brings in the excitement for me, at least, is that these lower seeded teams can get in. And as me and you agreed, we both thought that the 10th seed was actually the better team in this scenario. And like, I agree with you with injuries and stuff, but that plays both ways. Like the Lakers, the reason that they're in 7th is because of injuries. But the reason that, in my opinion, the reason that the Wizards are in 10th is also because of injuries. Clearly, Westbrook was injured at the beginning of the season, and he's been pivotal to this team's recent success. And Westbrook and that team, the Wizards, being in 10th, I think they deserve a chance at making the playoffs. And I think this one and done kind of thing is super exciting. And as to my point, I guess I have more notes to say, but as kind of like a wrap up that I've come to decide is, I think me and you both agree that usually the 8th seed is going to lose to that 1st seed. And I think that just happens. So whether, let's say the Hornets become the 8th seed in the conference and they play the 76ers in first, realistically, the 76ers are still going to win. But this play-in tournament creates excitement and it creates interest for fans because these teams aren't going to sit players. They aren't going to rest at the end of the season because they know it's just done. Because teams now have to compete. And I think that for me is where the excitement comes in. And that's why I like the play-in tournament.
I understand what you're saying about, like, going back to the Wizards example about how they had a slow start to the regular season because of injuries. But I think that this opportunity for the play-in tournament to like let those teams into the playoffs is just removing just even more meaning from the regular season in a way.
Really?
Because like,
okay.
If the Wizards were like, well, not if the Wizards like were terrible at the beginning of the year, they were one of the last place teams in the league. And I think that should still matter. You can't just introduce measures that just make it easier to recover from that. Despite how good that you might be at the end of the year, you were still dog water at the start of the year. And I think that there needs to be consequences for that. And like, I don't know, maybe I'm just an old man yelling at clouds here, but I think that introducing the play-in tournament, it's tampering with something that was just never broken.
Yeah.
The classic, and it sounds like a stupid argument because you make good points that like it undoubtedly adds excitement by having one and done.
Yeah.
Like you talked about the NFL playoffs. But the thing is, the NFL doing that, that's the NFL's thing. That's their bread and butter of like a big reason why people like the NFL, because every single game has meaning.
It's so exciting. Yeah.
But at the same time, the classic 1 to 8 playoff seeding is the thing of like leagues like the NBA and the NHL. So I just don't agree with deviating from the way that things have always been done when it works and there's no need to change it. I think in my opinion, I understand why it generates excitement, but I think it comes across as just a little bit gimmicky and just creates just unnecessary change. And that's mostly why I don't like it.
Yeah. And hey, you know what's great? And I think that's awesome about our show is that we do have this duality of opinions. Like you are more of an old head in the way that you look at kind of a league setup. Whereas I feel like I'm more kind of like, I'm open to just kind of trying new things. And neither of these opinions are wrong or right. That's not what we're trying to argue here. What we're trying to accomplish is to create a conversation and to talk about like what is interesting, what's beneficial for the league. And the last point that I'll bring up, I guess, is I like that the NFL, I'm obviously a new NFL fan, but I like that the NFL added that extra team to the playoffs. And I think it just, once again, like adding things, trying something new is exciting. And this, once again, this play-in tournament is just for this year. They've only decided for this year. They haven't yet come to a conclusion about what they'll do next year and what they'll do in the future.
I've been hearing that it's leaning towards permanent.
Yes, yeah. But I think as this year stands, I think it's with the COVID shit, with the injuries, with whatever you want to say, it's an interesting way to kind of just maybe, balance it out. Like, these are the teams that had a chance. Let's give them all a chance to make the playoffs. Let's give these 4 teams a chance to make the playoffs. And if it works, and if people enjoy it, and if it gets good ratings, which it probably will, we will maybe see this being kept in the future. And we'll have to see if it does. But I don't know. I'm excited. I'm excited for it. I mean, we're talking about it now, right? So the NBA has accomplished something.
Yeah, they got us. And
they got us.
The last thing that I want to say about it, and it's on the same note of like, you have this sort of like this, I don't know if duality is the right word for it, of that this play-in tournament was introduced to kind of like level the playing field that was introduced by COVID and a shortened season. But at the same time, the play-in tournament is now exacerbating the same issues that having a shortened season does. And that's increased back-to-backs, difficulty with scheduling postponed games, and then that leading to unsustainable workloads on players. Like, we're seeing it with like LeBron, we're seeing it with Damian Lillard right now, that in anticipation of possibly having to play in the play-in tournament, these guys are having to manage differently. Like you see Portland is sitting there at the 6th seed.
Yeah.
Damian Lillard for the past couple weeks has been playing through an injury because he knows that he needs to play for the Blazers to avoid the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
Whereas you see with LeBron, who's already sitting in the play-in tournament, he's now resting regular season games that could be used for the Lakers to move further up in the standings. They're 1 game behind the Blazers and 2 games behind the Mavericks, just to be ready for a one and done game in the play-in tournament. And I don't know if putting that kind of load on players, especially when you're going to start the playoffs literally the day after the play-in tournament, is a very responsible decision.
Yeah, I think for teams, I think LeBron and Damian Lillard, they have that perspective because they're sitting at those 6 and 7 seeds, whereas Memphis and San Antonio players, and even maybe Pelicans players and Golden State maybe wouldn't. And I know that obviously goes without saying, and those teams wouldn't even have to have that opinion in a normal season because this isn't the way, it's usually organized. There just would be no play-in tournament. But I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, the NBA is a business. They're trying to get ratings. They're trying to make fans excited. They're trying to, bring in as many viewers as they can. And they are accomplishing that, right?
They are accomplishing that.
Yeah. But I mean, and at the end of the day, like, who knows what's right and what's wrong? But I'm sure that, we'll be watching those games and we'll be watching them with excitement to see if, a team gets kicked out that, might not have in the regular season, in a regular season. So yeah, I think it's exciting, but and I can't wait to watch the games.
Yep. We'll see what happens with it.
Exactly. Okay. If there's anything else that we need to say, say it now or forever hold your peace. But
peace held. I'm gonna go shake my fist at kids on my lawn.
All right. So thanks everyone for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to watch it in your car or listen to it in your car, check out our Spotify. We were recently added to Spotify around 2 weeks ago. So yeah, check that out. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
See you guys.
Adios. And